Side Hustle Secrets is out right now. You can get into that course. You can learn my Core Force strategy as a corporate professional, learn how to take the stuff that's in your head and literally go have other people pay you for that information. And there's a ton of other things that I walk you through, real life training that you'll absolutely enjoy. You can go take care of that. With that being said, and with that out of the way, I am like super excited about my guest today. For those of you who are watching inside of the Side Business Builders Group, you guys are going to get a kick out of this because you guys get to see this interview before we put this public. But I want to give you a little bit of background of the person that I'm about to bring into this interview today, because this has been one that I always tell you guys, like, there are people that when you meet them or when you see what they do, my first question that I'm always asking myself, is that person really that genuine, or is this like a thing, right? Like, do they really do that in their business, or is it like they're inflating what's really going on? And I'm going to tell you, I only want to interview people who are actually doing the thing that they say. And I just want to give you a little bit of background on who Veena Jetti is. First of all, she's a powerhouse woman when it comes to real estate investing, in fact. And one of the cool things that she's learned to do, and I'm going to have her give us a little bit of game on how in the world do you actually pull off a real syndication deal? Because she's actually got some dope stuff going on all around the country. First and foremost, her multi-family portfolio of real estate is over $800 million. Just put a pin in that right quick. That's one stat. She's been a Forbes Council's member. She has her own fund called Vivi Funds. Am I saying that right? And one of the cool things is this is a woman who is honestly, from everything that I've seen of her, our first conversation, I love the fact that she is standing for women of color and she doesn't see ceilings or barriers or anything like that. What she sees is opportunities to kick another door down. And she's bringing a lot of people with her. I'm done with the introductions because I want to really get into this interview. Ladies and gentlemen, I want y'all to listen to this great conversation that I have with the one and incredible Miss Veena Jetti. Veena, how are you today? And I'm so glad you were here.
Yes, no, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. It was quite an intro.
well, listen, I've been doing my homework and I've been paying attention, and I really let me just first off say I appreciate the way you show up as a woman of color in the realm that you do, because the truth of the matter is, from the outside, right? Let's just be honest. Most marketing, most people would have you believe that there's only males at the top of that realm doing big business, right? Like,
Yeah.
or Venus must be working for somebody, right? It can't be really like her running, right? Like, you know how we do, right? Like, we come up with all of these assumptions. So before we get into where you are today, I want to go back a second.
Yeah.
Tell me what job you held down before you even thought about real estate, before all of that. What was Veena doing?
I actually was thinking about real estate then too, because I was in corporate real estate. So I worked for a lot of really large companies that had multi-billion-dollar portfolios. So I was still thinking about I come from a real estate family. Like, my parents have instilled a foundation of real estate in us since we were kids. So it's definitely nothing new for me to be involved in real estate. It's just, I had to scale it up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. What was your earliest memory of hearing these terms around real estate? Like, what was the conversation going on in this household that one day you actually, because some kids, right, they see what the family business is, and they kind of run away from it, right? Like, they're like,
I did that first.
You did that. Okay.
I did. Yeah. I graduated from college. My mom was like, come work for the family business. And I was like, I'm an adult with a college degree. No way. I'm doing something like totally different and on my own. And then I worked in corporate real estate for a few years and ultimately paid taxes as a married individual or as a married couple. And I was like, wait a second. Why do we just pay all this money in taxes? I call my mom and she's like, well, you need to get full time real estate status and you need to, leave your W 2 and start investing for yourself. So that's how I started my company, is because of the first year I paid taxes as a married person.
Mm, interesting. So when you think about like, when you think about your understanding of how it could work for you, what was
Yep.
the earliest property? What was the earliest conversation where you were like, wait a second, tell me more about that, mom and dad? Like, what was that property? What was going on? What got you to go, I'm going to take a hard look at this thing for real?
I think when I realized the power of real estate, it was actually on a property my parents had bought. I'm trying to think when they bought it. I don't even know. I must have been in my like teens, maybe even single digits. So it was early teens, single digits. And my parents bought the property like for me as a college fund, is what they said. And I didn't really understand what that meant. But basically, what they did was, instead of doing a 529 or traditional college savings for my sister and I, they just bought houses that they assumed would appreciate or cash flow and have enough equity in them to one day they could sell them or pull out equity in them to pay for college for my sister and I. And I think that those houses were probably the earliest time that I really understood what they were trying to do with real estate. And I mean, there were many terms that wouldn't click for many years after hearing them for the first time. But my parents never shied away from this conversation. Like, money wasn't really a taboo subject in our house. Investing was not a taboo subject. My parents were really good about instilling those money values in us from a very young age.
Gotcha. So when you said you ran away from the family business,
Yeah.
why? What was the thing for you?
I was 20 years old when I graduated from college, so I was young already. And I had this tenacity to think that I could do everything on my own without needing mommy and daddy to help me. I was very independent in that way. And so I I did go out into corporate America, and I did work for some large real estate fund, manage $1 billion asset. I was on the management team before I left corporate America. And so I learned a lot of really valuable lessons there that I probably wouldn't have learned having worked for my family and working in the family business. But I ran away from working in the family business only to work in someone else's family business ultimately, right? Because it's the same concept, just on a different scale.
So talk to me about, as you went through that journey
Yeah.
and you realize, well, I'm working over here, but in the same industry. What challenges did you find working in corporate real estate as a female that made you kind of go, yeah, it's not all what it's cracked up to be? What type of challenges were you seeing that just didn't agree
Yeah.
with the way you wanted to work?
Well, one, I don't know that this is have it has anything to do with being a woman, but I found out that I was actually not a very good worker bee. I don't like to work for someone else. I don't like to take direction from someone else. I didn't have the freedom to grow the business in the ways that I would want to. It was, and in corporate real estate at this size of deals, it's very buttoned up, very strict on how they allow you to operate. Everything is down to like the nitty gritty detail, and I'm more of like a big picture thinker. And so it just wasn't really a great fit for my personality, just in general. I mean, I will happily work 100 hours a week. I do often, um, but I'm doing it for myself, so I'm okay with it. And so for me, it just I don't want to be working for someone else if I can't effectuate change. I realized how important profit sharing was to me because I want to see the fruits of my labor. I don't care about a salary. I don't care about that kind of W 2 income. I care about me having a pay scale that's directly equivalent to how hard I work and how well I perform.
Hey, I know you're enjoying this episode, but I wanted to stop you really quickly and just ask you, did you know about the triangle of value that you provide in your corporate job today? Yes, profession, practices, and principles. And all of those your company is leveraging. Why aren't you? I mean, actually building out your own side business. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So I built something called Side Hustle Secrets. The Side Hustle Secrets is your opportunity to be able to take the knowledge that you have in your head right now and actually learn how to build you a profitable side business. There's a ton of value of things that you're going to be able to get in here, but there's one thing that I wanted to be able to show you because I know that for many of you, you are like me. One day you woke up and realized, you know what, this job ain't enough. In fact, you realize that if something ever happened, I am going to be in trouble. And I learned a little too late. I had to go through 2 corporate layoffs going from almost $80,000 a year down to $9.13 working retail because I never got it. Even though I had the title, I thought my job was secure. I never secured my own financial future. So I'm giving you the shot. Grab the link below. Go to growyoursidebusiness.com right now. Jump into the Side Hustle Secrets course. Let me show you how to take what's in your head and go build something with it. Back to the episode. And so you found that you could have that in real estate.
Yeah. Yes.
For those who are watching right now, let's do this. Walk us through an actual deal. In fact, let's start with a recent one that you just did here. Okay. So for those who are watching, by the time you guys see this, Veena and her team put together a deal in Charlotte, North Carolina. And let's talk through this deal. Like, and I don't want to start like at the very beginning. Like, how do you search for this kind of stuff? What does, and like, let's break it down. Like, what the heck what's the difference between syndication deals and just doing like an apartment or getting, like, how do people level up from a single family rental property that they fix and flip all the way to single? I really want to break it down so people get an understanding, so they can understand and see themselves too, that like anybody could do this work. It's just you got to know what work to do, right? So talk to me. Let's give everybody like an understanding of like this deal that happened in Charlotte. How did you find this piece of property?
Yeah, so I can't disclose the specifics of it because we have an NDA, but I'll say it's a 9-figure deal, right? So let's just use $100 million as the baseline of what we're talking about, right? This deal, it came to us through a broker and broker relationships that we have. It was on market. Usually the deals of our size in today's market are transacting mostly on market. We're now starting to see a little movement to off market. But as of right now, it's those broker relationships, mainly because we need someone who can endorse that, yes, we can close on a $100 million deal or an $80 million deal or whatever that purchase price is. So we found this on market. We underwrote the deal. The deal really made sense at the first pass. And we do many versions of underwriting before we get to closing. So we've underwritten this deal at least 50, 60, 70 times before we're even going out and closing the deal. But yeah, we found it on market. This deal was an on market deal.
Okay. So it was an on market deal. You guys find it. Talk to me about like, what do you look for? What's the signal to your team that goes, this is a good one? What things attract you guys that make it go, yeah, we need to look more into this one?
Yeah, we're pretty LP obsessed. So we're always looking at how these deals will execute and operate for our limited partner, right? So we look to what are the LP return metrics? Do they hit the buy box that we know our investors need today, right? So we need a certain amount of cash on cash and we need a certain amount of IRR. And that's going to be different for every investor, right? So my investor database might not be as aggressive as your investor database. If your investor database is willing to accept lower returns, you might be able to pay a little bit more than what I can pay my investors. So knowing and understanding who your investors is really important and critical.
Yeah. So if someone were to say, hey, you know what, Veena? I've got some extra cash. I have my corporate job. I've never thought about investing in corporate syndications. Tell us what an actual corporate syndication is, how it works, and how
Yep.
could somebody like actually invest their money? Because you said something really interesting. You said, I didn't really want the W-2 money or the corporate money. I really wanted to
Yeah.
be paid for what my work and what my worth is. And you wanted to determine that for yourself. But
Yeah.
for the high performing employee who might be watching this and going, I never thought about making that investment, because we typically think of, stocks. We think of, even crypto
Yeah.
nowadays. We think of like all these, and maybe some minor fix and flips. How
Sure.
does one get into a syndication deal of the types of things that you do?
Yeah, so there's two different ways you can get involved, right? You can either be a passive investor, which is an LP, or you can be an active investor, which is what I do. I'm the general partner or the sponsor on our deals. Um, the the key is if you are a high income earner, right? So let's say you're a physician, about 70% of our investors are physicians. If you're a physician, you earn a great living and you maybe don't even know that these opportunities exist for you, because I didn't know until I started doing this, which is crazy because I was in corporate real estate. I have a family that's in real estate and I still didn't know about this until I stepped into this world. So if you're listening to this and it's your first time, what a syndication essentially is it is, I like to tell people, think of it kind of like a Groupon for buying multifamily. So I put together groups of investors who maybe can't afford an $80 million property on their own, but you can afford to have $100,000 into one property and you get fractional ownership into that property. And it's a collective buying. So we pool together investor capital to go and buy an $80 million, $100 million building together. And then we, as the active sponsors, our role and responsibility is to operate it from A all the way to Z. So we find the deal, we source it, we underwrite it, we stack the capital, we put together investors, we execute the business plan, we refinance or exit or whatever that is. So we take it all the way from cradle to grave so that you, as a passive investor, you don't have to do any of that. All your responsibility is you vet me as the sponsor and decide, yes, Veena, I like you, I want to invest with you. Then you vet any project I put in front of you, say, yep, this is the project I want to invest into. And then you will have a set of documents you'll need to sign. You'll send your funds. And then once we close, you'll start receiving your monthly distribution. Some sponsors do quarterly, we do monthly. So just depending on your sponsor, you'll get a regular, hopefully a regular distribution, and you'll be able to see some solid returns. It's a great hedge to the stock market. Income producing real estate is a phenomenal hedge against inflation. So it's a great time to be investing in real estate.
Interesting. So you said it's a great time to be investing
Yeah.
in real estate. But wait,
Yeah.
Veena, did you see the
I
news
know.
recently?
I
Wait,
did.
Veena, do you see what they're talking about the next 18 months might look like? Veena,
That
why
makes
in the
me more
world?
excited. That makes me more excited. I feel like
Okay.
everybody focuses on the wrong part of the market cycle. Everyone thinks that, okay, in a bull run, we all made a lot of money. It was great. But the recession and the bear market is where ungodly amounts of money are made. This is
Mm.
where you have centimillionaires and billionaires born. It's not in the bull run. Everybody made money then. Now is when the true investors, like, this is not, someone had used a term like real estate tourists. During a bull run, all the real estate tourists are there, right? Like, everybody's a real estate investor. Everybody knows about real estate. Your Uber driver is going to give you advice on real estate investing, which is awesome. I love real estate as an asset class for everybody. But this market cycle is where we start seeing the real investors who truly understand the fundamentals being able to deploy capital rapidly into the right places and then wait for the market to come back up. Because one thing we know is that what goes down must come up and what goes up must come down, right? And so real estate is a cyclical market, and this time is no different in terms of, we know it'll eventually rebound. You just have to be patient. But if you plan for it and you understand how the market works, this is the time where we have the most opportunity ahead of us.
Interesting. So, you know, as you talk about that, how then do you change and help and move your message so that people can
Yeah.
understand that this is the right time to invest in order to be able to see in 18 to 24 months like really large returns, what things are you all saying to your investors so that they, especially if they're a novice investor, right? If they've never really done this before, and I'm sure you guys attract all kinds, right? Full-fledged
Yeah.
business owners who've got great businesses, like you said, full-fledged physicians and people who own
Yeah.
small business practices and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But what do you help them understand? Are you guys providing like certain communications every quarter to help them understand like how, this is still going to outperform what's happening overall? What communications do you provide to people?
I have to say, content creation is easily one of my biggest weaknesses. I am so bad at putting this information out intentionally. And I'll say I've been blessed to have really smart and sophisticated investors. So they already know and understand that like this is the time to take, like, we've done really well for our investors over the last several years, but this is the time to take advantage of the market. We do have a lot of family offices that invest with us, a lot of ultra high net worth individuals. So we've gotten really lucky in that regard, and we haven't had to do a whole lot of education. But I think that like the doom and gloom, that's the stuff that is probably going to affect the average American, right? But when we start looking to the highest income earners, yes, we feel inflation also, but we don't feel it at the same rate as the average American earner. And what high income earners generally have an issue of is their high income active earners, right? And so having active income is taxed very differently than having passive income. And I think, one thing my tax strategist and I always say is it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And having the benefit of real estate in your portfolio, it's a highly tax efficient vehicle. So most of our investors, they don't really care if they're going to get an extra like $500 in their bank account this month. It's a rounding error for them, right? What they care about is the tax efficiency of the investment, how passive the investment is, that their principal doesn't lose money. So they're looking to the market fundamentals. And then, the next thing is when, we do hit a home run or we do deliver a solid return. Historically, real estate, specifically multifamily, has the highest Sharpe ratio of any asset class, meaning it has the highest amount of return for the least amount of relative risk. And investors like that, they know they're going to make a solid amount of money, probably more so than they will in the stock market. It's not as volatile and it is tax efficient. So, what more can a high income earner really look for?
Hey, are you enjoying this episode of the show? I know you are. That's why you're here. Well, I also know there's probably like 1, 2, or 3 other people who are just like you. They're loving conversations about building and growing their side business. They're looking for a community of people, and they're also like really serious about what they're doing just like you. Well, they don't know that this exists until you tell them. So here's what I'd like for you to do. I'd love for you to share this. I'd love for you to talk about it. In fact, I'd love for you to post about it. Why don't you also follow me? But more importantly, you know what you could do? Leave us a review. If you leave us a review, guess what happens? Other people will find out about it because it becomes discoverable by other people who are just like you. So if you do those things, it'll cost you nothing, but it'll be grateful. And I promise I will be grateful for every single one that comes through. All right. Other than that, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, 100%. So, I saw a couple of posts, and I want to ask about some of your captions because I thought they were pretty cool.
Okay. All right, tell me what I said. What did I say?
No, they were actually pretty good. I want to get some context. So, before we get to those quotes, help our audience understand why is real estate a really good idea to even jump into as a side business?
Oh, I mean, it's easily scalable. It's the scalability that I care about more than anything, right? And that's why I like multifamily so much. I can be asleep and I can collect rent from one door or 10 doors or 10,000 doors all at the same time in the same hour. What I can't do is go to work and, like, if you're a physician, right? I can't see 10,000 patients all in the same hour, right? It's not practical. I can't see them all at the same time. But with real estate, you can scale up very quickly. You're not limited to just what time you have available.
Yeah. So we're gonna start with the most recent quote that I
Okay.
saw, and then we're
All
gonna
right.
we're
Let's.
gonna work. I got saw something like about a year and a half ago, and I was like, let's ask about that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So I love this one. You said, and I quote, "I won't take anything under 200 units."
Yeah.
200 units. Talk to
Yeah.
me, Veena. What is going on right now? Like that's 200 units. Why will
Yes.
you not do anything under 200 units?
Because again, going back to scalability, I prefer to be in deals that have larger scale. It's more efficient to operate. There's less risk in them. They're not as volatile. You can share common expenses across 200 doors instead of 20 doors. So I like the 200 plus units. Now, I should have put like a small, tiny asterisk on that, right? Because I will buy something that's like 195 units if it's in a market that we're already invested into, or if we really like the deal, or once I had a deal come up, literally the property next door to a deal we already owned, and it was smaller than 200 units, but we bought it because now we control the entire north part of a neighbor, of like a subdivision or an area. So there was a really good reason for me to buy that. So, but generally, I and I really should have said I strongly prefer 300 to 400 units and up.
Wow. But so you said 200 units. You'll buy something smaller. So you just used the word less risk. Wait a second,
Yeah,
Veena. Hold on.
I
Back
know.
up.
I
Time
know.
out. What do you mean by less risk with more
Yeah.
doors? I understand the point of we're all sharing kind of, with all of the people that are renting. But
Mm.
why would you say, as the person, gotta be the leader in taking on this and making sure that it's a good deal for your investors, your LPs? Talk to me about why is that a less risky opportunity?
Right. Well, if you think about it, there's more stability in a 200 unit asset than there is in, let's call it a 10 unit, a 10 plex, right? So there's more stability. If you look at vacancy, right? If you have 10 units and one person moves out, you now have a 90% occupancy. That means that 9 of your units are taking on the stress of maintaining the parking lot, landscaping, pool, trash removal. Everything is falling to just 90% of your units. If I have 200 units and 10 people move out, I'm still at a 95% occupancy. And we don't actually want to be 100% occupied in 200 units. We want to hover in that probably low 90s to mid 90s range. So I have the ability to manage it a little bit more effectively and a little more efficiently. And vacancy is not a huge concern for me because one tenant moves out on 200 units, fine, we'll replace a tenant and we can see where the market can tolerate, and we can charge more or less rent accordingly to get our occupancy back up, but we don't destabilize by having one tenant move out. The other thing is contract services. I have a much different negotiating power when I'm negotiating for 200 units to get painted versus 10 units to get painted. So I get a little bit cheaper labor and material costs on any renovations I do, any contract services I have. For example, our landscaping is very different negotiation at 200 units versus 10 units. So there's just less risk inherently from any single unit or something happening in any one unit.
Okay, so we're using this word risk, and Veena, you strike me as the person who
Yeah.
has like an ironclad stomach for risk. Like you seem like you like the bigger the opportunity, you're like, sign me up, I'm all in. How did
Mhm.
help our audience understand how do you develop that? Like what
You
how
know,
do you get
actually,
into that
say
space?
I actually don't have an appetite for risk. I actually have probably the least amount of appetite for risk amongst my colleagues in what we do because I invest pretty significantly alongside my investors. So my JV partner, Ellie Perlman, and I, we are both the largest investor into our deals. Like our families combined are the largest investors into our deals. So we actually don't have an appetite for risk. this is, like I said, it has the highest Sharpe ratio. It's the least amount of relative risk to the highest amount of relative return historically in this asset class. So I always tell investors, when you think about our deals, like if you think about paint drying, that should be probably more exciting than what we do in the multifamily space. We're pretty boring and vanilla. So I don't have a very ironclad risk tolerance. I actually have a very low risk tolerance. If I had a higher risk tolerance, I would be going into like new dev. I would be going into units that were like completely offline for some reason or destabilized. We just go for like that very boring, stabilized Class B value add asset, no hair on the deal, very clean deal, lower returns than if I went into new dev, but the appropriate amount of risk for my appetite.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. So tell me this: you've been successful. How long you been doing this? How many years?
So I graduated from college in 2007. So 15 years I've been either in corporate or in my own company. I left corporate in 2012, so 10 years ago.
Okay, so you've been doing this side of it for 10 years straight.
Hmm.
Is there some big goal that you have that you're like, I want this thing, and this will make me like I'm. This is what I'm really reaching for while I'm making
Uh,
this happen. What is that?
yeah, I mean, I always have goals, right? And then once you hit them, you recalibrate and you make the new goal and the next goal, right? So yeah, I've been doing that since I started. Right now, my biggest goal and the biggest thing that I have my sights set on is actually not even monetarily related anymore. I have young daughters and I want them to be able to see that someone that looks like them is in this space and that they can do this too if they want to. And so for me, it's more about the systemic change that comes from being a very, very small minority in a very white male dominated industry.
100%. I like that. Um, so if you look at the to your point, if you look at the landscape of kind of who's doing things in your asset class, you travel a
Mhm.
lot. You get a chance to see your
I do.
peers. You get a chance to see the conversations. You know the rooms that you either sit through. I always say
Yeah,
some rooms we just sit through, and some of them we actually sit in. Right?
that is very true. That is very wow. That's like a life-changing statement right there.
It's just true. Some of them we sit through.
Yeah,
How have you
many
been
of them
able
I
to
sit
keep?
through.
Yeah, how have you been able to keep your eye on your goals when you know sometimes you're walking in certain rooms that it's not that there's no respect there, but unfortunately sometimes you've had to do a little extra to be able to get the level
Yeah.
of respect that sometimes your white male counterparts get. How do you keep yourself focused when you know that sometimes you got to sit through a lot of these rooms?
Yeah, no, it's that's actually an interesting question because I used to always kind of fall in line before, I didn't want to like ruffle feathers and then there came a point where I'd accomplished some amount and I was like, okay, now I have to like say who I am so I can prove and like tell you about all the great things I did. Now I'm at a point where I'm like, all right, if you are not going to take an opportunity to hear what I have to say, then that's your loss. And that's totally fine. But what I do now, which I'm pretty vocal about, is whenever I see any like of my good friends, right? Sometimes they'll speak on these at these events or on these panels where it's like just no diversity represented. And so I'll ask them, I'll be like, hey, I love you, bro, but do you only speak at events where like women aren't invited or minorities aren't invited? And usually they're good people. I know them. So they're always like, oh my gosh, I feel like a total ass. I can't believe that I didn't even recognize that. And that's actually their voices are so strong in creating that change
Mm-hmm.
and changing the narrative. And I'm so grateful to every single friend of mine that has received that feedback and actually been actionable and intentionable with it. And even now, if I see something on social media where they have like a lineup of 25 men or 25 non-minorities, I always ask, I say like, hey, I'm sure you guys are still working out the details, but are there going to be women and minorities represented in these
Mm,
dialogues? And I don't say it in a mean way. I don't say it in a threatening way, because the reality is if it's not your truth and it's not something you've lived, it just is a blind spot. You just don't know. And
yeah.
sometimes it just takes someone asking about it for you to open it up and reconsider it. And we want to make change.
Yeah, 100%. I like that. So, there was a post you did uh back in June, and
Okay.
I really I want to get your understanding of this. So you were talking about how you got your work ethic. And you talked about
Mhm.
what you saw from your mother, and because this is a family part of the business, right? What what is it about your mother that you saw that said, you know, I don't have to accept whatever this social norm is. I can actually
Mhm.
like I can win on my own work and my style and the way I like to do things. What was it that she was displaying in front of you that just made you realize, no, I can do this and still be my authentic self?
Yeah, I think part of it, I was like born with this nature, and my mom just nurtured it in me. And, I am my mother's daughter. We're very much alike. She's always been somebody that felt that is there's the world is big, and there are opportunities out there that you would can't even dream of. Like, if I was talking to Veena even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I would have never dreamed that I would be where I am right in this moment. It's crazy to me. And so now I can only think about, like, what will Veena in 10 years be saying that I just don't even know exists now. And so for my mom, it was always being able to work hard. She never stopped learning, and she's just tenacious, that she never takes no for an answer. And, she's always moved forward with that kind of grit and determination that she's really honed in my sister and I.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the events that I saw you did a while back, it was you, Maxwell, who's also here in the North
I
Carolina area. Um, you know, you were on that panel, and I noticed that you light up at certain topics, certain things
Yeah,
that if somebody says it, it's like it strikes a chord with you.
right.
Give me one of those things that you really want um, people of color to understand about real
Hmm.
estate, and why now?
Gosh, there's so many because I'm like a numbers nerd, so I kind of light up when we talk like numbers. My favorite part of the business that we touch is investor relations. I love talking to our investors. That's like easily the biggest win for me. And then also like tax and legal strategy. My attorney hates that I love this because I'll like geek out and I'll be like, "Oh, but what if we do this one thing and this one thing?" And he's like, "Stop, just stop. You're not a lawyer. Just stop." Um, but I do enjoy discussing like structure and how to make things work that maybe wouldn't have worked in a traditional fashion, but how can we structure a deal so that the seller and the buyer both win? So that investors are insulated. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, and that I really love. So it's like more out of the box thinking.
Hey, you're enjoying this episode, right? Well, there's something I wanted to share with you. Have you ever heard of the triangle of value? Well, it's something that I actually teach in my Side Hustle Secrets course. See, you actually have a profession, you have practices, and you live by a set of principles. That is your triangle of value. Well, within that triangle of value, you are so valuable in the marketplace that what you know in your head, somebody else is willing to pay you in order to be able to get that information so that they can do the same thing that you're doing. But you didn't know that until now. Well, I've created something just for you. I got a course called the Side Hustle Secrets course. If you go to thesidehustlesecrets.com, you can go ahead and get into my course. I teach you how to use that triangle of value and actually be able to create you a great online profitable business. But here's the cool part. Along with that, I show you my core 4 strategies and how to be able to take that triangle of value and turn it into 4 different streams that you could be able to leverage to be able to build you a great side business and reduce the financial stress. Because listen, I know you're enjoying your job. I know you've done all the work that you needed to get where you are today. But I also know this, between layoffs, firings, and downsizings, it's bound to happen. It happened to me twice. I don't want it to happen to you. Or at least if it does, you have something to fall back on and you don't have to hurt you and your family. I know you got a lot of information in your head and I know you could scale it. And I know there's somebody else out there who is happy, willing to pay you to get that information. Well, let me show you how to do it. Go to thesidehustlesecrets.com, get the course, and let's work together to build out and build you what you need for you to have a great side business. Let's get back to the episode. Yeah, I was telling my wife this not too long ago. One of the things that I noticed is a common thread between a lot of high achievers and a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to is there's this level of creativity that is just like, it's amazing. And I think, sometimes you hear like these really cool stories. I'm sure you have a ton of them. I'm sure we could spend an hour and I could talk to you about a deal and how many ways you had to get creative and how many times you had to get creative to get that deal all the way to the finish line, right?
Oh, yeah.
Talk to me about that level of creativity that you have to use. And how is that serving you to be able to continue to know like that, we're going out here and we're looking at new stuff, but I'm not afraid because I trust my gut and I trust this formless, strong current of creativity. How are you leveraging that in your day-to-day?
Yeah, it lets us win deals that we wouldn't otherwise be able to win without adding extra risk to the project, which, like I said, I'm not actually very risk tolerant. So for me, it's really important that we mitigate risk out of the gate. So a great example, right, is during COVID, we were trying to buy an asset in Marietta, Georgia. It's an Atlanta suburb. And we were in the middle of 2020. And how do we do due diligence on almost 500 units? How do we walk 500 units? There was no vaccine at the time. We weren't really sure what the implications of COVID were. People were still dying. Long COVID was still a thing. How do we do due diligence? And so, we started getting the creative juices flowing. We had thought about, okay, at one point we were like, maybe we send a drone into each unit to video everything and then we can do due diligence that way. But that's very, expensive and time consuming and it's tough to do. And I don't know about you, but whenever I tried to fly a drone, I'm like crashing into everything around it. So it's just like not practical. But so what we ultimately ended up doing is we ended up structuring so that we could walk as many units as possible. However, any units that said they were positive for COVID, with OSHA and everything, and just from a moral standpoint, we couldn't send anybody in to inspect those because we couldn't risk someone, putting their health at risk for an acquisition. It just wasn't worth it for us. So what we did instead was we said any units we can't complete due diligence on before closing, we'll put into escrow, X amount of dollars per unit. And then within 60 days post-close, we'll conduct the due diligence and then we'll true up after we close. And it ended up being like, I think it was then about like 40 units or something, for maybe 20, 40, something like that we couldn't walk. And we put aside a certain amount of dollars and then post-close, we were able to walk those because we couldn't get over the risk factor of we don't know what's behind the door. What happens if we walk into one of these units that was like a COVID unit and it's really like, there's nothing else except for studs in there. It's a very expensive cost that we wouldn't have planned for. So that was how we were able to mitigate risk. But being able to think creatively like that and having experience from other creative solution allowed us to build and to be able to go in and close that deal. And we ended up making like a massive return for investors. They ended up almost doubling their money in 18 months. So it was a win-win for everybody.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Last couple of questions here before we wrap. Yeah. You mentioned your daughters.
Yes.
And obviously they are your two heartbeats walking on 2 feet. Right?
Oh, yes. yes.
Let's go 10 years from now. 10 years from now, they'll come back and watch this interview. They'll see their
Whew.
mom. They'll
Yeah, okay,
see.
maybe. Yeah, they might. I didn't
Yeah,
really think about that.
they'll see this interview. What is it that you want them to know about why you make the sacrifices today 10 years earlier before they see this interview? What do you want them to understand? Because they're going to be living a life 10 years from now that was built today.
Yeah.
So what do you want them
Um,
to understand about what you're doing?
yeah, so 1, girls, you don't have any money, you are poor, and so you have to work hard if you want to live the life that mommy and daddy have provided for you. That's the first thing I want them to know. The second thing I want them to know, though, is that they can do anything, and, your gender, your race, your religion, whatever, is not a reason for them to be held back from doing what they want to do and what they can do, and that regardless of what they choose to do, they should move forward and have an eye of being the best at it, whatever it is, right? Like if you want to be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, it doesn't matter. Just have the aim of being the best at whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be kind, you have to treat other people the way you wanna be treated. Nobody ever made a dollar by themselves. It always takes the help of other people, and, we have a lot of privileges, and it's their responsibility what they do with it after it's been given to them.
Yeah, that's good. Um, you know, as I followed you a little bit over the last several months on
Yeah.
social media, and I know you said you're not good with content, but clearly you have an opinion, and you don't mind sharing that, which is a
Who,
good thing.
me?
I think it's great. I think it's actually awesome. Um, there's a lot of high performing corporate ladies out here who are in a
Yeah,
corporate job, and
yes.
they look at Veena and go, "Man, that would be awesome to be able to be able to make those types of investments and take a risk on yourself." One of the things I talk about a lot is people don't bet on themselves enough, right?
Yep.
You bet on yourself, and 10 years
Yeah.
later, here you are. It was a good bet, right?
Yeah.
Talk to the lady who's working that VP job, who's working and leading her organization, who's responsible for whatever the number is, whatever the responsibility is in his time. What is it that she needs to understand about why she should bet on herself with something and not just give
Mhm.
all of her identity over to the title or the umbrella brand of the company that she's working for?
Well, it's, like that saying goes, either you work on your own dreams or someone like me is going to hire you to work on mine. And it's really important, especially as women, that we recognize what we are capable of and we are diligent of, and that we help each other to get to a point of financial independence and financial security. I keep quoting this stat recently in the speeches I'm giving, but only 31% of investors are women. So we've come a long way. There's a much further way to continue going. And, the time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And so it can be overwhelming, it can be scary, it can be daunting. That is completely normal. Settle into that feeling, but use that to empower you to make future decisions for yourself that will not just create financial security for you, but creates generational wealth. And you can't save your way to wealth in this country, not in today's day and time. But what you can do is you can invest your way to wealth.
100%. Well, listen, Veena, it is a pleasure. I know your life and time are busy, so I want to say thank you for
Thank
listening
you.
and stopping by the Grow Your Side Business podcast. Lastly, I will say this. I'll give you any parting words for those who are listening, but feel free to tell everybody, like, where can they find you out in these social media
Yeah.
streets, and any last words you'd like to leave with our audience.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to get into analysis paralysis and kind of get deer in the headlights, but don't let that stop you from keeping on moving forward. Rome was not built in a day. My company wasn't either, but you can do this, and you have a responsibility to yourself and to the people that depend on you to be financially savvy and to learn and understand what options are out there. As far as if you want to find me, I'm basically on all social media as Veena Jetti, VEENAJETTI. And I just started a free Facebook group, which is a bunch of active investors or people wanting to be active. So, not so much passive, but active investors. I do things like challenges and I give out like the tools. It's called Mastering Multifamily with Veena Jetti. Everybody's welcome there. It's a community really for us to learn and grow together and get your questions answered and just understand what's happening. So, you're welcome to join there. But yeah, you can reach me on any social media platform.
Awesome. Well, listen, Veena, thank you so much for your time, and let me say also thank you for your contribution to this world. Um, there
Thank
aren't
you.
enough books that can be written about these stories that start in one place, and we won't be around to see the full impact because it'll be generations from now. But
True.
thankfully, you started, right?
Yes.
And
Thank
that should be commended, because
you.
your daughters and everybody else will pick it up and continue to move on and build it better.
I
So
hope
thank you for
so.
your time. We appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely.